It was raining so hard I could barely see the street in front of me. My coat was soaked straight through, clinging to my skin like it was part of me. The wind stabbed through the seams like little knives, and my boots, cheap, too thin, were sloshing with ice-cold water every time I moved. I didn't even bother avoiding puddles anymore. What was the point? I was 7 months pregnant, alone, tired, broke, and I was walking down a busy street with no umbrella, no ride, and no one waiting for me. You know that moment when you realize nobody's coming? Nobody's checking in. Nobody's going to stop and ask if you're okay. That had become my normal. Every day was survival. Wake up, find a way to eat, hope the baby kicked, cry when no one was looking. That day, I had just left a clinic. They had confirmed what I already knew. My blood pressure was high, my iron was low, and the stress was putting the baby at risk. But what were they going to do? Admit me to the hospital I couldn't afford? Prescribe rest I couldn't afford to take? So I did what I always did. I said thank you, put on my brave face, and walked back into the storm. The city didn't care. No one slowed down. No one stopped. Cars splashed water at my ankles. Horns blared. Someone even yelled at me to get out of the road when I stepped a little too close to the curb. I remember I was trying to cross this big intersection. No crosswalk, just a break in the traffic near an office building. My hands were shaking. My belly was cramping. I could barely hold my bag anymore. And then I heard it. The sound of a car accelerating fast. Headlights. Close. Too close. Everything froze. I turned my head, and for a split second I saw the front end of a sleek black luxury car. Low, silent, deadly, barreling toward me through the rain. I couldn't move. I didn't even scream. All I could think was, this is how it ends. Not in labor. Not in a hospital. Just like this. Alone. In the rain. No one will even know my name. But at the last possible second, the tires screeched. The car swerved and stopped inches from my knees. I staggered backward, heart racing, gasping for air I couldn't find. My legs buckled and I fell, right there, into a muddy puddle. It didn't even matter. I was shaking, clutching my stomach, whispering to the baby, it's okay, stay with me. Then the door opened. Out stepped a man, tall, well-dressed, umbrella already in hand. And he didn't shout, didn't scold, didn't even ask what the hell I was doing in the road. Instead, he said, are you hurt? His voice was calm, controlled, but his eyes looked like he'd just seen a ghost. That was the first time I saw him. The man who almost ended my life and would soon change it forever. But right then, all I could do was cry. And for once someone didn't look away. He stood there for a moment, holding his umbrella over both of us as I sat in a freezing puddle on the sidewalk, trembling like a leaf. The world moved around us, cars driving past, people rushing by, heads down, ignoring everything. But him? He didn't look away. He didn't flinch. He just watched me, like I was something he couldn't make sense of. Something fragile. Human. It was the first time in months I felt like someone actually saw me. I braced for it. The lecture, the judgment, the obligatory "are you okay?" followed by a quick, polite exit. That's what people do, right? They panic, they pretend to care, and then they leave. But he didn't move. And then, he did the last thing I ever expected. He knelt down, right there, on one knee, in a $1,000 suit, in pouring rain, on the filthy, freezing sidewalk. His shoes were ruined, his cufflinks soaked, but he didn't seem to care. Can I help you up? He asked gently. I blinked. I was speechless. He reached for my hand like it was made of glass, slow, deliberate, like if he moved too fast, I might shatter. And for a second, I almost pulled away, because that's what I was used to. Protecting myself, refusing kindness, preparing for cruelty. But something in his face, the quiet, unwavering steadiness in his eyes, made me pause. So I gave him my hand, and he helped me to my feet. I was shivering, soaked to the bone, mud dripping from my coat, hair plastered to my face. I probably looked unrecognizable to even myself. But he just looked at me, not with disgust, not with pity, but with this strange, unreadable focus. Then he took off his coat, not in a showy, dramatic way, just practical, gentle. He wrapped it around my shoulders like it was the most natural thing in the world. It was warm, smelled faintly of expensive cologne and leather. I'm fine, I stammered. Really, I slipped. He didn't call me a liar, didn't push. He just nodded. Still, he said, you should sit down. My car's right here. I tensed. Stranger. Fancy car. Rainy night. Pregnant. Vulnerable. Everything I'd ever been taught screamed, don't trust him. And yet, he didn't pressure me. Didn't touch me again. Just opened the back door and said, you can wait here while I call someone. I'll stay outside. I don't know why I believed him. Maybe it was the cold. Maybe it was the baby kicking like a warning. Or maybe it was that for once, someone offered help without strings. So I got in. The car was warm. So warm I nearly cried just from the feeling of heat against my skin. Through the fogged window, I watched him make a call. He was pacing in the rain, umbrella tucked against his shoulder, voice low and urgent. And that's when I realized he wasn't annoyed. He was scared. For me. He got back in after a few minutes, sat in the driver's seat, and looked at me through the rearview mirror. You should be in a hospital, he said. I can't afford a hospital. I didn't ask if you could. That silenced me. He pulled off gently and drove with the kind of focus I hadn't seen in years, not distracted, not impatient. Just calm. Like protecting me had suddenly become his entire mission. I watched him in the mirror. His jaw clenched. Rain streaked the windshield like tears. I didn't even know his name. But in that moment, sitting in the back seat of a stranger's luxury car, I felt safer than I had in months. Maybe years. He pulled up to the emergency entrance of the county hospital, one of the few places that would even look at a pregnant woman without insurance. I thought that would be it. I figured he'd unlock the doors, maybe say, take care, and speed off to whatever lavish penthouse or boardroom he was headed to before I stepped into the road like a drenched disaster. But that's not what happened. He parked, turned off the ignition, and got out. I stepped out of the back seat, unsure whether to thank him or run. My legs were still shaky, and I had to grip the edge of the car to steady myself. Come on, he said softly, offering his arm again. Let's get you inside. We walked together. His pace matched mine exactly, like he was tuned to my breath, my faltering steps. Inside, the fluorescent lights hit me hard. The warmth made my body tremble again, but not from cold. From everything crashing in at once, the exhaustion, the hunger, the fear of the hospital bill, and the knowledge that I had no one to call. No emergency contact. No family. No father for the baby. No one. I expected him to hand me over to the front desk, nod politely, and disappear. But instead, he stood beside me while the nurse took my name. He stood there while they asked if the baby's father was around. He didn't say anything. He didn't pretend to be something he wasn't, but he didn't leave, either. And when they took me into triage, he followed. Only when the nurse finally asked, "Are you the father?" did he hesitate. "I'm a friend," he said slowly. "Just making sure she's all right." I blinked. A friend. I hadn't heard that word in so long, I wasn't sure it applied to real life anymore. Hours passed. They hooked me up to machines. Monitored the baby's heartbeat. Ran blood work. I kept expecting them to come back and say something was wrong. That the stress had done damage. That I was losing the one piece of me I had left. But the heartbeat stayed steady. Strong. My baby was still fighting. So I kept fighting too. At some point, I drifted off. And when I woke up, it was dark outside. Rain still tapping against the windows. My mouth was dry. My head aching. I looked toward the door, expecting to see an empty chair. But he was there. Still there. Sitting in the same seat. His coat folded on his lap. Head tilted back against the wall. Eyes closed, but not asleep. Like he was standing guard. I couldn't help it. Tears stung my eyes again. I didn't even know this man's name. Didn't know what kind of life he lived or what made him care enough to stay. But he had. When so many hadn't. When even the baby's father had run the moment I told him I was keeping the child. This stranger, this man who nearly hit me with his car, had done more for me in a night than most people had done in years. Later, when the nurse came to discharge me, I asked quietly, "Is he still here?" She smiled. "Yeah, he hasn't moved. Said he wasn't leaving until you were safe." I almost laughed. Safe. What a foreign word. But maybe, not anymore. When I was finally discharged, the nurse handed me a copy of my chart, a new bottle of prenatal vitamins, and a folded blanket. "Someone left this for you," she added. I unwrapped it, his coat. The same one he'd wrapped around me in the rain. Dry now. Pressed. Neatly folded. But still his. And still warm. I don't know why that small gesture hit me harder than anything else. Maybe because it was so unnecessary. Most people drop kindness like coins, just enough to say they did something. But this was something else. He had stayed. Waited. Left his coat, like he thought I might still need it. And when I stepped into the lobby, he was there. Waiting. Still, I froze. He stood up slowly, as if he wasn't sure how I'd react. His eyes searched mine, not pushy, not proud, just quiet concern. "You all right?" he asked softly. I nodded. He stepped forward, held the umbrella out, and said simply, "Let me give you a ride." For a moment, my chest locked up, because this was the moment I was used to when things turned. When the favor would come with a catch, a condition, a demand. When help turned to manipulation and kindness turned to control. I learned early that nothing came free, especially not from men. So I hesitated. He must have seen it in my face. That flinch. Because he didn't insist. He didn't coax. He didn't even look hurt. He just said, "You don't have to," and turned back toward the door. Like he was ready to walk away if that's what I needed. That's when something cracked open inside me. Because nobody ever gave me a choice. They told me what to do, where to live, what to keep quiet about. Even when I got pregnant, the baby's father told me, "You're on your own if you keep it." I'd made every decision since then with a gun to my chest, metaphorical or not. But this man, he gave me space. Not pressure. Not pity. Just space. A car door open. A warm coat in hand. And the words, "It's up to you." I got in. And he didn't celebrate like he'd won something. He just adjusted the seat warmer, made sure my seatbelt was on, and started the engine in silence. As he drove, he didn't ask invasive questions. He didn't dig into my life. He didn't ask who the father was or why I was walking alone in the rain. He just asked one thing. "Do you have somewhere to go?" That one question shook me. Because the truth was, I didn't. Not really. I had a friend who said I could crash on her couch, but she was in another city. I've been trying to make it there when the rain caught me. Everything I owned was in a plastic shopping bag under my feet. No job, no plan, just the baby in me. I looked out the window and whispered, "Not tonight." He nodded once, then turned the car. We drove through quiet neighborhoods, past glowing windows and warm homes that looked like another planet. And finally, he pulled up to a small guest house tucked behind a large modern home. Clean, quiet, gated. He turned to me, not smiling, just steady. "I have a spare room. You can stay here for the night. No strings. Just rest." I looked at the door, then at him. And for the first time in a very, very long time, I said yes. The guest house was small but warm. Cleaner than anywhere I'd slept in months. There was a soft bed, fresh linens, a little kitchenette, even a basket of toiletries someone had clearly put together with care, soap, lotion, a fresh toothbrush still in its wrapper. I couldn't remember the last time I felt that kind of softness. Safety. Quiet. He didn't hover. He didn't check in every 10 minutes. He just handed me a spare key, pointed to the fridge, and said, "Rest. We'll talk in the morning if you feel up to it." And then he left. No questions. No lectures. No looks. Just space. I cried that night. Not from sadness. From the shock of being treated like I mattered. I don't think people understand what that does to someone who's been invisible for too long, someone who's learned to survive off scraps of decency, used to bracing for judgment or betrayal. I was asleep before I could even dry my tears. And when I woke the next morning, the sun was shining through the windows like it was some kind of cosmic joke, like the universe had finally remembered I existed. I felt different. Still tired, still scared, but not alone. I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water. The TV was on in the background, low volume, tuned to the local morning news. And then I saw him. His face. Right there on the screen. Same eyes. Same quiet steadiness. But this time, the anchor was calling him something else entirely. Multimillionaire tech philanthropist and venture capitalist Adrian Wolf made headlines last night after a late-night hospital visit caused speculation. My knees buckled. Adrian Wolf. That name echoed through my head like a warning bell. I knew that name. Everyone did. He built entire tech companies from scratch. Sold 2 of them before turning 35. Now he was the face of half the nonprofit health programs in the state. Magazine covers. Interviews. Charity galas. And he had nearly hit me with his car. No, not just nearly hit me. He saved me. He saw me. And gave me a place to sleep like I was just another human being, not some problem to be solved or a sad case study. I stared at the screen, mouth dry, glass trembling in my hand. I didn't know what to do. Should I leave before he changed his mind? Should I apologize for not recognizing him? Should I thank him again? Or pretend I hadn't seen anything? I felt foolish, insignificant, out of place, like I trespassed into a world where I didn't belong. The knock on the guest house door made me jump. I opened it slowly. And there he stood. Same calm expression, same tailored shirt, this time holding a paper bag and 2 cups of coffee. I thought you might be hungry, he said, like nothing had changed. But everything had. You're Adrian Wolf, I blurted out. He didn't even blink. That's what they call me, he said. But I'd prefer if, for now, you just call me Adrian. He held out the bag. Still offering. Still not forcing. Breakfast. I took it, hands shaking, because no one had ever fed me without wanting something in return. Not since I was a child. And now here was a man with more money than I could even imagine, who could have driven off without a second glance, handing me a muffin and saying my name like I wasn't beneath him. Just equal. We sat outside on the tiny porch of the guest house, the morning sun cutting through the cool air, the coffee cups warm between our palms. Neither of us said much at first, but the silence didn't feel awkward. It felt earned, like we'd both survived something just to be sitting here. I kept glancing sideways at him, at Adrian Wolf, the man whose name echoed across newspapers and investment articles, who was always in a tuxedo or shaking hands with political figures. But in this light, in his rolled-up sleeves and sleepy eyes, he didn't look like a billionaire. He just looked like someone who'd seen too much of the world. He took a sip of coffee, then finally said, I wasn't always this. He gestured vaguely to the house behind him. The suit. The name. I didn't respond. I wasn't sure what to say. Then, as if the words had been waiting years to escape, he began. I grew up with nothing, he said. Like food stamps, roaches in the walls, sleeping in my coat in the winter kind of nothing. My mom was sick for most of my childhood. My dad left when I was 7, so it was just me in a system that didn't care whether I lived or died. He looked down at his hands. I got good at pretending everything was fine. It's a survival skill, you know? Smile wide. Don't cry. Don't ask for help. People like that more. They don't want to see the mess. I swallowed hard, because I knew that feeling all too well. He continued, voice lower now. When my mom passed, I was 16. I got tossed into a group home. They said I was too old to foster out. His eyes locked on mine. I remember nights where I'd stare at the ceiling and think, if I survive this, I'm going to make sure no one else feels this invisible again. That was it. That was the fire. The reason he built what he did. Why he stayed with me in the hospital. Why he waited in the rain. He understood. My voice cracked as I whispered, You saw me that night, because you'd been me once. He nodded. Not dramatically. Not to impress. Just because it was true. I couldn't drive away, he said. Not when I saw the way you looked at the world. Like it was always about to punch you in the stomach. He paused. Like kindness was a trick. And that broke me. Because it was a trick. At least, it had always been. Until him. I wiped a tear off my cheek, embarrassed, but he didn't comment. Didn't offer a napkin. Didn't tell me to calm down. He just let me feel. And for the first time, I didn't feel ashamed of it. He leaned back and stared at the sky. I don't know what I'm supposed to do with all this money anymore, he admitted. You give it away, build shelters, invest in change, but it never feels like enough. Not when you've lived on the other side. He looked at me again. But last night, helping you, that felt real. Like something I was supposed to do. I wanted to say something. To thank him again. To tell him he'd already done more for me than anyone else ever had. But I couldn't find the words. So I just said, I'm really glad you didn't drive away. He smiled. And for the first time since I met him, it reached his eyes. Later that afternoon, we sat on the floor of the guest house, the sun slipping lower, casting golden slants of light across the wooden floorboards. I was curled up in one of his oversized sweaters. He'd found it in a storage closet and insisted I take it. It smelled like cedar and something clean. Safe. We talked for hours, but mostly about unimportant things, favorite foods, the music we listened to when we couldn't sleep, the weirdest places we'd cried. It was light, and it was healing, but there was one subject we hadn't touched. The baby. And we both knew it. So when he finally looked at me and asked, gently, Can I ask about the baby? I froze. Not because I didn't want to talk about it, but because no one ever asked. They assumed. They judged. They labeled. But he asked. And waited. I nodded, slowly. It was never planned, I said quietly. I paused, forcing the words out. The father left the moment I said I wouldn't terminate. Said he wasn't ready to be a parent, and I was ruining his life. Adrian didn't speak. He didn't offer pity or outrage. He just listened. I continued, voice shaking. I didn't have anyone. My parents, they said I made my bed. I lost my job when I got too far along to hide it. And I kept telling myself, if I could just get through the birth, if I could just survive, then maybe there'd be something good at the end of this. I looked down at my hands resting on my belly. He kicks when I'm scared, I whispered, half laughing through the lump in my throat. Like he knows when I need reminding that he's still here. Adrian was silent for a moment. Then he said, with more warmth than I expected, "You're stronger than anyone I know." I blinked. I don't feel strong. I feel like I've been holding my breath for months. He smiled faintly. Maybe, but you're still here. That counts for something. And then, he asked something I didn't expect. Do you have a name picked out? I hesitated. No, I admitted. I wanted to wait. I didn't want to name someone I might not be able to keep. The words escaped before I could stop them. The truth I hadn't said out loud to anyone. I couldn't guarantee I could feed this child, clothe him, give him a roof. What kind of name do you give to a life you're terrified to fail? Adrian didn't react with shock. Instead, he looked at me, really looked, with a gentleness that made my chest ache. And he said something I'll never forget. If you ever need help, real help, not charity, not a handout, just someone in your corner, I want to be that person. I stared at him. Why? His eyes held mine. Calm. Certain. Because I see something in you I wish I'd had when I was a kid. Someone who didn't give up. Someone who kept showing up. And because maybe I just want to believe that broken people can build something better together. That moment stretched like a held breath. The world felt quieter, slower, like something had shifted. He wasn't just offering support. He was offering belief. And for someone like me, that was everything. A week passed. Then two. Adrian didn't push. He didn't pry. But he never once made me feel like a burden. He checked in without hovering. Brought groceries without asking. Made the guest house feel like more than a stopgap, like a home. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for kindness to turn into control. I was waiting to believe it was real. Then the bleeding started. At first, just spotting. I panicked. He saw it on my face before I even told him. Within minutes, we were in the car. He didn't ask questions. Just drove. One hand on the wheel, one on my shoulder. Steady. Present. At the hospital, I sat in a thin gown, shaking. Heart pounding with every possibility I didn't want to name. He didn't leave my side. Not for a second. The doctor finally came in. Older. Stern. Professional. She looked at me, then at Adrian. Are you the father? She asked. He opened his mouth, paused, then glanced at me. I nodded, barely perceptibly. He answered simply, yes. It broke something open in me. The news wasn't what I expected. It was worse. The baby was fine, thank God, but my body wasn't handling the pregnancy well. My blood pressure was dangerously high. There was mention of bed rest, of possible early delivery, of risks, of decisions I might have to make. I heard the words, but they felt distant, like they were hitting someone else. All I could think was, what if I fail again? I curled up on the bed once the doctor left, facing the wall, shaking, ashamed to cry in front of him. But I didn't need to hide, because Adrian sat beside me, quietly, and then I felt his hand in mine. Not gripping, not saving, just there. I'm not going anywhere, he said softly. That's when I broke. Sobs came out in waves, the kind that had been buried for years. The kind you don't even know you're carrying until someone lets you fall apart. And he didn't try to fix it. He just stayed. In the weeks that followed, he helped me set up appointments, arranged a nurse to check on me, made sure I had everything I needed. And slowly, I began to believe that maybe I wasn't alone anymore. That this wasn't just about survival. That maybe, just maybe, I could build something new. He never asked for anything in return. But one morning, after a long night of baby kicks and no sleep, I turned to him on that same guest house porch and whispered, I think I'd like you to be there. When he's born. He smiled. A real one. Full and bright. I wouldn't miss it for the world. Because the richest man I'd ever met didn't give me money. He gave me safety. He gave me choice. And he gave me the courage to believe and love again.